The Montana wind screamed across the high plains as Thad Blackstone crawled through the buffalo grass, his face a ruin of acid burns and his left eye gone from the vitriol they'd thrown on him. Blood seeped from his wounds, leaving a crimson trail behind him as he inched forward on elbows and knees. At 54, the former territorial Indian agent had negotiated hundreds of treaties, prevented countless conflicts through patient diplomacy, and spent 26 years bringing peace between warring cultures on the violent frontier. His weathered hands had signed documents that protected thousands of acres of tribal lands, and his voice had translated complex legal concepts into multiple native languages with a fluency that earned respect from both sides. But he'd never expected to be disfigured and left for dead by his own government supervisor, betrayed for the crime of refusing to break treaty promises that would steal Crow hunting grounds for a gold mining operation. The betrayal cut deeper than the physical pain, though the agony of his melted flesh threatened to overwhelm his consciousness with each labored breath. "You're too sympathetic to the savages, Blackstone." Supervisor Hartwell had sneered as his hired thugs held Thad down and poured the burning acid across his face. The liquid had sizzled against his skin, the smell of his own burning flesh filling his nostrils as he screamed. "This territory's got no use for Indian agents who can't tell the difference between redskin rights and white progress." Hartwell wasn't just any government official. He was a decorated Civil War veteran with connections to senators and railroad barons, a man whose word carried weight in Washington and whose ambitions knew no moral boundaries. His progress had been a carefully orchestrated scheme to void existing treaties and force the Crow Nation onto barren reservation land, opening their sacred hunting grounds to mining companies that had paid handsomely for access. The gold deposits discovered in the eastern foothills promised millions to whoever controlled the land rights, and Hartwell had no intention of letting tribal claims stand in his way. When Thad discovered the conspiracy and refused to falsify the treaty violations, Hartwell had decided that a tragic frontier accident would solve his problem permanently. The supervisor had personally supervised the torture, watching with cold eyes as his men destroyed Thad's face and reputation simultaneously. Should have stuck to translating languages instead of translating consciences. Hartwell had laughed as they loaded Thad onto a supply wagon and dumped him in the wilderness 50 miles from the nearest settlement. "Maybe the wolves will appreciate your diplomatic skills." Now Thad dragged himself through the sage and prairie grass, his ruined face throbbing with each heartbeat, his remaining eye watering constantly from the chemical damage. His throat burned with thirst, his lips cracked and bleeding from 3 days without water. Twice he'd heard wolves howling in the distance, and once a mountain lion had tracked him for nearly a mile before losing interest in such slow-moving prey. In the distance, he spotted smoke rising from a hidden valley, the first sign of life he'd encountered since crawling away from Hartwell's torture chamber. Hope gave him strength to continue, though each movement sent fresh waves of agony through his damaged body. The sun beat down mercilessly, baking his wounds and adding sunburn to his miseries. By the time he reached the edge of the valley, his consciousness was fading in and out, his vision blurring as dehydration and infection took their toll. The trading post sat beside a natural spring, surrounded by teepees and log cabins that spoke of someone who understood how to bridge two worlds. A wooden sign swung gently in the breeze, its carved letters spelling out Sullivan Trading in both English and Crow pictographs. Horses grazed in a nearby corral, their coats gleaming with health and care. Smoke curled from stone chimneys, carrying the scent of cooking meat and medicinal herbs. Thad collapsed at the wooden steps, his blood staining the planks that bore both carved eagles and painted thunderbirds. His remaining strength gave out as he reached for the door, his scarred hand falling limply against the weathered wood. The door opened to reveal a woman in her late 40s, her auburn hair braided with beads and feathers, her green eyes holding the calm wisdom of someone who'd learned to walk between cultures without losing her soul. She wore a mixture of frontier clothing and Native American accessories, a calico dress with beaded moccasins, silver bracelets alongside a trader's leather apron. Her movements carried the quiet authority of someone who commanded respect in both worlds. "Great Spirit," she breathed, taking in Thad's condition. Her eyes widened at the severity of his wounds, but her hands remained steady as she knelt beside him. "What happened to you?" "Government supervisor." Thad gasped through swollen lips, each word a struggle against pain and dehydration. "My own supervisor. Tried to kill me." The woman, he'd later learn her name was Mary White Dove Sullivan, helped him inside without hesitation. Her trading post was well organized and comfortable, with furnishings that blended American craftsmanship with Native American artistry, speaking of someone who honored both heritages. Shelves lined the walls, filled with trade goods, medicines, and books in multiple languages. Maps covered one wall, showing tribal territories and migration routes alongside government survey markers. "Your own supervisor did this to your face?" she asked, examining the acid burns with hands that moved with gentle expertise. She dipped a cloth in cool water and began cleaning his wounds, her touch professional but compassionate. "Caught him, breaking treaties," Thad managed between painful breaths. "Selling crow hunting grounds to mining companies. Didn't appreciate my interference." Mary's expression darkened with recognition. She'd seen this kind of systematic betrayal before, the calculated cruelty of men who used government positions to justify their theft of Native American lands. "Monsters," she said quietly, reaching for a jar of salve made from local plants. "They'd steal the very earth from under our feet." For 3 months, Thad drifted between consciousness and fever, while Mary tended his wounds with a mixture of frontier medicine and traditional Crow healing practices she'd learned during her years among the tribes. She applied poultices of yarrow and echinacea to fight infection, brewed willow bark tea for pain, and sang healing songs in the Crow language while changing his bandages. She couldn't restore his eye or completely heal the acid burns, but she managed to save his life and preserve most of his remaining vision. The trading post continued its business around him, with Mary handling everything from fur trading to language translation to conflict mediation. Thad heard her speaking multiple languages: English, Crow, Blackfoot, even French to the occasional trapper from Canada. Her voice remained calm and authoritative, whether negotiating prices or settling disputes, earning respect from everyone who entered her domain. When Thad finally sat up clear-headed, he found Mary mediating a dispute between Crow hunters and white settlers over grazing rights, conducting negotiations in a mixture of English, Crow, and sign language that demonstrated her role as a bridge between communities. Her trading post served as neutral ground where different peoples could meet safely, knowing their concerns would be heard with equal respect. "You speak Crow," he observed, watching her work with natural diplomacy. Her fingers moved in the fluid gestures of Plains Indian Sign Language, translating complex concepts between languages with practiced ease. "I speak whatever builds understanding," Mary replied, organizing her translation notes with professional precision. Her handwriting was neat and methodical, recording agreements in multiple languages to prevent later misunderstandings. "Out here, you learn to honor all voices, or you don't survive long." Her story emerged slowly over the following weeks. Mary was the daughter of an Irish trader and a Crow medicine woman, raised in both worlds until the Indian Wars forced her to choose sides. She'd learned languages as naturally as breathing, absorbing cultural nuances that most outsiders missed entirely. She'd married a government interpreter who'd been killed in a deliberately caused stampede when he tried to expose illegal land grabs, leaving her to survive with nothing but her knowledge of multiple cultures and her determination to protect what remained of Native American rights. "White men think I'm a half-breed," she explained, checking her inventory of trade goods with scientific precision. Her ledgers showed transactions in multiple currencies: American dollars, fur pelts, and traditional tribal exchange values. "Indians think I'm too white. I walk between two worlds and try to build bridges." Thad told her about Hartwell's conspiracy, the broken treaties, the years of honest service repaid with disfigurement. Mary listened without judgment, occasionally nodding as if she'd heard similar stories before. Her eyes hardened when he described the specific treaty violations, her knowledge of both legal documents and tribal customs, allowing her to understand exactly what had been stolen. "This Supervisor Hartwell," she said finally, pouring them both cups of strong coffee. "He thinks treaties are just paper to be burned. He thinks I'm a fool for believing in government promises, too naive to understand that Indian relations are about taking everything we can get." Thad's scarred fingers traced the rim of his cup, his remaining eye focused on memories of betrayal. 26 years of service, and all it earned me was acid in my face. "Maybe he's right about one thing," Mary said, her tone thoughtful as she stirred honey into her coffee. "Maybe the old way of treaty-making is finished. Question is, what are you going to negotiate to replace it?" Their partnership began when a range war threatened to explode between Crow warriors and white ranchers, with both sides claiming the same water rights based on conflicting interpretations of treaty language. Thad's knowledge of federal Indian law, combined with Mary's understanding of Crow culture and traditional land use, allowed them to identify a solution that honored both legal obligations and cultural needs. They created a water-sharing agreement that recognized seasonal usage patterns, allowing both communities access to the critical resource without diminishing either's rights. "You still know your calling," Mary observed as they watched former enemies share a peace pipe over a negotiated agreement. The sunset painted the Montana landscape in gold and crimson, highlighting the beauty of the land they'd helped preserve. "No treaties, no tribal customs, know how to read the truth when both sides are lying," Thad replied, touching his scarred face unconsciously. The disfigurement had become part of his identity now, a physical reminder of the price of integrity. "Out here, that's still worth something." Word spread through the Montana Territory about the trading post at Broken Arrow Creek, where White Dove Sullivan and the scarred agent could solve problems that had stumped territorial authorities for years. Ranchers brought boundary disputes, tribal leaders sought interpretation of government documents, and settlers requested mediation for conflicts that might otherwise have erupted into violence. They developed a reputation for fairness that extended from the Yellowstone River to the Canadian border. More importantly, they found in each other something they'd both thought lost: cultural companionship, shared purpose, and the deep love that comes from working together to heal the wounds between peoples. Their evenings were spent translating documents, studying maps, and discussing the complex interplay of tribal customs and federal law. Their relationship deepened through shared work and mutual respect, blossoming into a partnership that transcended conventional boundaries. The confrontation with Supervisor Hartwell came 2 years later. He arrived with territorial officials and forged documents claiming Thad was mentally incompetent due to his injuries and needed to be placed under Hartwell's care as his former supervisor. The papers bore official seals and signatures, products of Hartwell's extensive network of corrupt officials. "There's the old Scarface," Hartwell announced, pointing at his former agent with a gold-headed cane. His expensive suit and polished boots spoke of the wealth he'd accumulated through his illegal land deals. Living in squalor with some half-breed squaw, probably can't even remember which tribe is which anymore. That emerged from the trading post, no longer the broken man Hartwell had tortured and abandoned. Hard work and purpose had strengthened his body, while finding his true calling had restored his spirit. His face was permanently disfigured and his vision limited, but his mind was sharp and his voice carried the authority of genuine expertise. "Hartwell," he said calmly, standing tall on the porch of the trading post. "You're looking prosperous. The treaty-breaking business treating you well? Don't get smart with me, Blackstone. I'm here on official territorial business." Hartwell waved the forged documents, his confidence bolstered by the armed men who accompanied him. "These papers say you're not competent to manage your own affairs. I'm taking you back to Helena for proper care." "Official?" Mary stepped out beside Thad, a rifle cradled in her arms. Her expression was calm but determined, her stance making it clear she would defend her home and partner. "Funny thing about that. I sent some messages to friends in Washington and Fort Benton. Seems the federal government's been investigating treaty violations." Hartwell's confidence wavered as he realized they'd been building a case against him for months. Mary's connections in both the Native American and government communities had provided access to records and witnesses that painted a clear picture of systematic treaty fraud. The evidence had been carefully compiled and sent to honest officials who couldn't be bought with mining company bribes. "This is a setup," Hartwell sputtered, his hand moving toward his gun. His eyes darted between Thad's scarred face and Mary's steady rifle, calculating his chances of silencing them both. "No," came a new voice from the ridge above. "This is justice." Chief Plentycoos emerged from the rocks with a dozen Crow warriors, their faces painted for war. They'd been tracking Hartwell's movements since learning of his plans to steal more of their ancestral lands. The chief's eagle feather headdress caught the sunlight as he guided his horse down the slope, his dignity and authority evident in every movement. "You want to break more promises to our people?" Plentycoos called out in perfect English. His warriors spread out in a semicircle, effectively surrounding Hartwell's party. "Break your own bones first." The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring. Hartwell's officials were outnumbered and outgunned, facing not just angry Crow warriors but federal investigators who'd been tracking his conspiracy for over a year. The mining executives who'd funded his schemes had abandoned him once evidence of his fraud became public, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. "This isn't over," Hartwell snarled, backing toward his horse. His hand still hovered near his pistol, his eyes calculating the odds of a successful escape. "Yes, it is," came another new voice. A federal marshal rode into the valley, flanked by territorial investigators and several angry mining executives who discovered Hartwell's plan to use their operations as cover for his systematic land theft. "Supervisor Hartwell, you're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and attempted murder." Hartwell's empire crumbled quickly once federal authorities began examining his treaty records and interviewing witnesses. His conspiracy had reached far beyond the original Crow hunting grounds, involving systematic violation of treaties with multiple tribes across 3 territories. The investigation revealed millions of dollars in stolen funds, falsified documents, and at least 3 other accidents that had befallen government agents who questioned his methods. He died in federal prison 18 months later, still claiming he'd only been trying to develop Montana's natural resources. "Feel better?" Mary asked as they watched the federal party disappear over the ridge, Hartwell in chains between 2 marshals. The evening light softened the landscape, highlighting the beauty of the land they'd helped protect. "Feel honored," Thad replied, touching his scarred face. The disfigurement no longer defined him. It had become simply one part of a life dedicated to justice and understanding. "For the first time since they burned me, I feel like I'm truly serving both peoples." Their partnership deepened into something more profound than business or convenience. They established a cultural mediation service that served the entire territory, providing treaty interpretation and conflict resolution to anyone who needed it, regardless of their race or ability to pay. Their reputation for fairness and cultural understanding brought them clients from as far away as Wyoming and Dakota Territory. "We make quite a team," Mary observed one evening as they sat by the spring, watching the sunset paint the Montana sky in brilliant reds and golds. The trading post had expanded to include a proper mediation office, with maps and legal documents organized for easy reference. "We make a bridge," Thad corrected, taking her weathered hand in his scarred one. Their fingers intertwined, symbols of 2 cultures finding harmony through mutual respect. The kind that's built on respect rather than conquest, on understanding rather than fear. At 56, Thaddeus Blackstone was no longer the broken-down agent who'd been disfigured and left for dead by a corrupt supervisor. He was a guardian of treaty rights, a protector of cultural understanding, and living proof that diplomacy was strongest when it served justice, rather than just convenience. His scarred face had become a symbol of integrity throughout the territory, recognized and respected by both Native Americans and settlers. The plains that had nearly claimed his life had instead given him purpose, partnership, and the chance to use his expertise for something greater than mere government policy. His knowledge of treaty law, combined with Mary's cultural understanding, created solutions that honored both legal obligations and traditional values. preventing conflicts that might otherwise have escalated into violence. And Mary Sullivan had found something she'd thought impossible. Not just love, but professional partnership with someone who saw her mixed heritage as strength rather than confusion, who understood that the strongest bridges are built by those who truly belong to both sides. Her trading post had evolved into a cultural center where different peoples could meet in safety and mutual respect, learning from each other's traditions while building a shared future. Together, they'd carved out their own piece of the American dream in the windswept beauty of Montana's high country, proving that sometimes the people society discards become the ones who build the most lasting peace. Their trading post became a landmark on the frontier, Broken Arrow Creek Mediation, where cultural understanding and treaty law went hand in hand. The wagon trains still rolled past their valley, carrying settlers and dreams across the expanding West. But now they carried something else as well. The knowledge that there were still places where promises mattered more than profit, where scarred faces couldn't scar an unbreakable spirit, and where two people who'd been written off by the world proved that the most important treaties are those written not on paper, but in the human heart, sealed with respect, understanding, and the unwavering belief that all peoples deserve to live with dignity on the land they call home.